back in London and I have to get baby car washed. So I'm sitting in it while they're giving me a good old splash and polish and rub. And I will, this episode, in episode 96, I shall be looking at life in general, but also specifically in my music career. I'll tell you a few stories from that, as well as a few political stories and events that have happened to me over the past 70 years since I grew over through puberty and into adulthood. So hopefully you'll stay with us, enjoy it. If you do, please comment under the YouTube video and let me know your thoughts on the entire show. Welcome to episode 96 of A Victim Bites Back. One of the sad things of getting old, and I'm almost 80, is that loads of your friends tend to drop off the twig. 5 of us often used to meet for breakfasts and have a good old gossip, all of us in our 80s or 90s, or in my case 70s just. And 2 of the 5 of us have passed away over the last few months. It really is very sad. It used to be the 5 Musketeers. Now it's just the 3 Musketeers. And every couple of months or so, we have breakfast and chew the fat, including memories of times gone by and thoughts about those friends of ours who have now passed on. Someone who didn't come to our breakfast, but who I knew very well and who was a lovely, lovely man, just died, Alan Rebick. Alan was an actor, but also he did various other part-time jobs. That's him on the right, beaming at the camera. And one of the jobs he did was he was a part-time waiter at number 10 Downing Street whenever they had receptions and gatherings there. And some of the stories he told me about his time as a waiter there and what goes on behind the scenes at number 10 Downing Street were unbelievable. R.I.P. Alan, a lovely, lovely guy. For some reason, trending on Twitter, or X or whatever you call it these days, has been the name Kenny Everett. Kenny was a very dear friend of mine in the 1960s and remained so from then onwards. Indeed, I enabled Kenny to lose his virginity when he was about 20 or 21 or so, and I introduced him to somebody who he fancied like mad, but didn't dare approach. So I then approached the person on his behalf, who said, oh yes, he thought Kenny was lovely, and that was how Kenny had his first experience. Of course, I slightly regret it, and that it did lead eventually to him catching AIDS and then dying. But even so, that was the way the world was going to go. I've been reading his autobiography, which is absolutely brilliant. It's called something like Custard North of Hatfield or something. Well worth getting hold if you've never seen it. But there are numerous mistakes in it, which I could correct. Not that it's worth doing now. He was a lovely, lovely guy and a really talented DJ and comedian. What about this yacht that went down and the incredible coincidence that virtually at exactly the same time in Cambridgeshire, Mike Lynch's co-defendant in the case is killed by a car? Now, we know that they've examined the driver of the car, and she's a totally innocent woman who just made a mistake. We can't think that anything happened to the yacht that wasn't in Mother Nature's hands and God's hands. It can't be. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. It can't have been the people who resented Mike Lynch for ripping them off or whatever, trying to get their own back. It is an appalling tragedy, but it says to me there is more in this world than we know about. Somehow that has to be more than a coincidence, the two of them dying hundreds, thousands of miles apart, under completely different circumstances. I liken it a bit to what's happened to me in my life. I've seen karma kick in and do all sorts of bizarre things. Max Clifford, who started the whole thing about me, as you know if you've watched a lot of these shows, is now dead and ended up in prison dead. The original false accuser, who was a client of Max Clifford's, has ended up as virtually as a vegetable, unable to speak or communicate with anybody. So many people involved in the whole thing have died, and I have to say, that's karma. That's somebody up there working on my behalf. I hate it. If given my choice, I would have stopped all of those things. I would have stopped the prosecution of Max Clifford and everything, given my choice, because I think it's awful to do that to anybody, even your worst enemy. And Max Clifford was certainly not my worst enemy. Talking of karma, some years ago, the MP Nigel Evans got involved and embroiled in a scandal, was sent to trial and was totally acquitted on all charges. And around that time, I thought I'd really like to meet this guy because I think he could be a supporter, as indeed he turned out to be, getting together with my friends Paul Gambaccini and Cliff Richard to talk about the false allegations industry. Well, he lost his seat. He was Deputy Speaker in the House of Commons. He lost his seat in the last election, but we remained good friends, and I went to his lovely apartment in what used to be the County Hall to have dinner this week and have a long chat about the world in general and karma, because I met Nigel Evans, karma, at a hotel in Marrakesh. He was sitting by a swimming pool, sipping a beer. I recognised him, went up and spoke to him, and that's how we met. It's a wild world indeed. And some years ago, I thought the Pet Shop Boys' It's a Sin was melodically rather similar to Cat Stevens' song Wild World. To make my point, and they then sued me, I recorded my version of Wild World a la Pet Shop Boys.
Say you wanna start something new, and it's breaking my heart.
One of the stories I've told before about the ghastly Arthur Springrice Piper, a headmaster at Stoke House School when I was there. I've told this in previous episodes, so skip past it if you've already seen it. But one of the things we had to do was every day or so, we had to go out as a crocodile, all dressed impeccably in grey suits with shorts, long white socks, and shirts and ties with the school emblem on them, and we were walked down to the town of Seaford, all the way along the promenade and back up to the school. And it was a way for Arthur Springrice Piper to show off how obedient and clean and nice the boys were. Anyway, I did that every day as instructed, and one day there was a new boy who was obviously completely terrified by what was going on, and he was so terrified that as we started to walk down the promenade, he shat himself, and brown shit dribbled down the back of his legs onto his white socks. And Piper, who saw this, was horrified and said, "Right, you're to walk 20 yards behind us, boy, and you, the rest of the boys, you're not to speak to him or anything until we get back to school. Pretend he's not with us." Well, I thought this was terribly unfair. I was, 10 or something at the time. The boy was 8 or something. I thought this was awful, and I hated Piper anyway. And I fell back and put my arm around the boy's shoulders, which was rather unpleasant because he was quite smelly with all the shit, and said to him, "Don't worry about it. This sort of thing happens all the time. You'll get back to school and matron will clean you up. It'll all be forgotten. You needn't worry." And the boy looked at me and said, "Won't you get beaten for talking to me?" And I said, "Oh yes, but he beats me all the time. He doesn't need an excuse. He's a horrible man." In fact, I think I said he's a cunt. I didn't really know what the word meant at those days, but I knew it was quite a shocking word. And I went on all the way back to school with my arm round the boy, 20 yards behind the rest of the crocodile. And then we finally reached the school. The boy went off to matron and was cleaned up. Piper sent for me, obviously, in the study and thrashed me yet again, as he always did, with one hand deep in his trouser pocket, grunting until he finally stopped. Horrible man. Anyway, I thought you'd be amused by that story. I have no regrets. I'm very glad I did it. So what's going to happen with the presidential election in America in November? I think there's going to be an absolute landslide for Kamala Harris and the Democrats. In fact, I think they'll even win the majority of seats in the Senate and in Congress, which will enable her to do all sorts of things that she wants to do, and changes which me, basically being a Democrat or a left-wing sort of person socially, will probably approve of, although financially I tend to be more right-wing, although I do think some of the things she's saying, like slightly higher taxes on the very wealthy and the corporations, are a good idea. But mainly I think Donald Trump is a complete spent force now. He was fine, or wasn't even fine actually, not my kind of person at all, but he was perfect for 8 years ago. And everybody caught on. He was different. He dared defy the media, which I thought he was brilliant at doing. He fought all the legal situation when the opposition attempted to destroy him through stupid laws and rules and so on. And he came through as a winner every time and was elected president. But that was then. This is now. He's that much older. Times have changed. He looks old and senile and decrepit. His hair is falling out in lumps. He's looking more and more falsely made up and everything else. Most of his supporters are now dead of old age because they were always the older people anyway. I suspect Trump is going to find he's going to lose out. The main thing being, if Kamala Harris and the Democrats have got the sense to devote 80% of their budget, which is now huge, at the dozen or so swing states and buy time on television and on radio and billboards and posters and everything else, the punters will do as they're told. And they do as they're told when they are told by a lot of money being spent on various media, by the way, including social media. And I think that is going to swing things over. And I reckon by the time the election comes up in November, you'll see all the polls saying this is going to be a landslide for Kamala Harris and the Democrats. What is going on in Gaza? What I think should happen is there are about 2 million people in Gaza, all living in incredible danger and poverty and everything else. I think 1 million of them should march out of Gaza into Tel Aviv, which is about 50 miles away. And they should march through the barriers and cut the barbed wire open and all the rest of it. They should be led by people who got machine guns in case any of the ghastly Israeli border guards decided to shoot and try and kill them, in which case, I have to say, 1 million people, quite a lot of them being armed, would probably destroy those guards in seconds. But before that happened, there should be no violence whatsoever. It's just a march to find safety and security and hospitals and food and drink and all the rest. And they should take with them, quite clearly announced in large placards, 50 of the remaining hostages, saying they are taking them to Tel Aviv to return them to the Israelis, and they expect a large amount of their prisoners from Israel to be there waiting for them as well. And that's it. The 1 million people would then invade Tel Aviv and take over the city, again with no violence whatsoever unless provoked. One of my guilty pleasures each year is roast grouse, young grouse, which start being shot on the 12th of August. But this year there's been a terrible shortage of grouse. They finally arrived on the 24th of August, 2 weeks after they usually do. I bought myself a brace and roasted them and had them with bread sauce, roast potatoes, bacon, broad beans and Tsingtao Chinese beer. So I'm at the Picture House Central about to see my movie and I got here and realised my Alzheimer's has kicked in so much I couldn't remember the title of the movie. We spent about 10 minutes trying to find it, although luckily I had remembered it began at 1:15, so that narrowed it down to 3. It's called Blink Twice, and I'll let you know what I think of it afterwards. Blink Twice is actually very good, and I thoroughly recommend it, but not if you don't like horror movies and films that have got an enormous amount of violence, blood and gore in them. I told you I would talk about the music industry, and I think I'll go on about that longer in the next episode. But one of the things I saw during the week on the Sky Arts channel, which I've never looked at before, was about Motown and the man who founded Motown, Gordy, who is still with us, aged 96, I'm glad to say. He was fantastic. But what really struck me is in many ways he was quite similar in America to what I was doing in Britain. He had all those wonderful Motown smashes. He was a writer, a songwriter himself, as indeed I was and still am, but he realised that many others were much better at songwriting than him, Holland Dozier Holland, Norman Whitfield, Smokey Robinson and so on, and as a result he concentrated on building a company that promoted great mass appeal smash hit records from artists of all colours, all skin colours, all genders, and he was brilliant, way ahead of his time. Do try and watch that documentary if you can. I don't know what it's called. It's on Sky Arts. It's about Motown, and it was fantastic to watch, but I really did see a similarity in the way my career developed in Great Britain around the same time. I had a load of hits, but I wasn't a great singer. I wrote a few smash hit songs, but I wasn't a great songwriter. I then proceeded to produce others, and some of them sold millions of records and appealed to all sorts of different people. And I went on as an executive, running a couple of major record companies, including my own. I had a very, very happy and successful life as somebody in the music industry, but it basically came to an end in the year 2000, and I've had a lot of fun since then. Of course, it's Notting Hill Carnival at the moment, and I've lived in my little house for almost 60 years now, and I was at the first, second, third, fourth Notting Hill Carnivals, and I loved them. They were great fun. But slowly they got more and more crowded, more and more noisy, with all those horrible whistles going on all the time, and some crime and everything else. And so, whilst I still love all the colours and all the amusing parts of it, I now tend to just go out earlier in the day, watch everybody coming to appear in the carnival, and then go off somewhere else to enjoy myself. See you next episode.